How could I have been so stupid to believe him? The words escaped my lips in a broken whisper, dissolving into the oppressive silence of the living room. The wedding photo on the mantel seemed to mock me, its frame gleaming under the soft light of the lamp. There we were, frozen in time, my eyes bright with love, my hand resting on his chest, and his smile, the one that made me trust him. A smile so practiced, I wondered now if I ever really knew the man I had married. Julian. Even his name sounded smooth, too perfect, like he'd been crafted by a committee who knew just how to make women fall apart for him. He had that kind of charm that could make you forget yourself, make you second-guess the evidence staring you in the face. 6 months ago, I'd done just that. The confession had come like a knife to the gut. He'd been unfaithful, he said, his voice trembling, his eyes glistening with tears. He called it a mistake, a drunken night of regret. He promised it meant nothing. And in the face of my anger and heartbreak, Julian did what he did best, he disarmed me. He gave me the apologies, the flowers, the endless reassurances that it would never happen again. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. For months, things were better, or so it seemed. He became attentive, doting even, but always with an edge of desperation that I convinced myself was genuine guilt. I ignored the little things, the sudden need to work late, the overly locked phone, the way his smile no longer reached his eyes. I chose to believe in the man I had married, not the stranger he was becoming. And now? Now I was sitting here, hands trembling, staring at a pair of black patent leather heels that didn't belong to me, abandoned near the front door. The sound of muffled laughter drifted down from upstairs. It wasn't just any laughter, it was his laugh. Rich, warm, and dangerously seductive. But this time, it wasn't meant for me. My breath caught in my throat as I stood, heart pounding. Every step up the staircase felt heavier, like I was walking to my own execution. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to spare myself what I knew I was about to see. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed to see. I reached the bedroom door, pushed it open with trembling fingers, and froze. Julian was sprawled across our bed, his shirt unbuttoned, his lips hovering dangerously close to another woman's neck. She was stunning in a cold, calculated way, silky red hair spilling over her bare shoulders, her lips painted a brazen crimson to match the heels downstairs. The intimacy between them was palpable, undeniable. They hadn't even noticed me standing there, watching, as the threads of my reality unraveled. When they finally saw me, Julian's face went white. He scrambled upright, his mouth opening to say something, anything, but no words came out. The woman simply stared at me, her expression unreadable, as if she were assessing the situation, already deciding what her next move would be. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even slam the door. I turned on my heel, walked out of the room, and descended the stairs in silence, the walls seeming to close in on me with every step. My mind swirled with questions that I couldn't answer. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was she the same woman from before, or someone new? And the one question that refused to leave me alone, who was Julian, really? Sitting now on the couch, I clenched my fists, trying to stop the trembling. Julian had promised me he would never hurt me again. Julian had lied. The door to the bedroom opened softly above me. I heard the muffled shuffle of footsteps and the hurried rustle of clothes. My pulse thundered in my ears as I waited, silent and still, on the couch. I wasn't ready to face him yet, but Julian, as always, was ready to spin his web. Helen, his voice drifted down the stairs, warm and careful, the way you'd speak to a wounded animal. He was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the cracks in his performance. It's not what you think. The audacity of his words broke something in me. Not what I think. How many ways could I interpret another woman draped across our bed? The bed where we had whispered dreams about our future, where I had fought to rekindle our love after the last time he betrayed me. My nails dug into the couch's fabric as his footsteps grew louder, each one fueling my simmering rage. Julian appeared in the doorway, his shirt half-buttoned, his hair disheveled. If I hadn't known better, I might have mistaken his disarray for genuine distress. Helen, he started again, stepping toward me. Don't, I said sharply, my voice cutting through the tension like a whip. The single word stopped him mid-stride, his hands frozen in the air as if he'd been caught in headlights. She means nothing to me, Julian stammered, his voice thick with desperation. I swear to you, it's not serious. It's not. Who is she? My voice was ice, each word deliberate. I stared straight into his eyes, daring him to look away. He hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. It doesn't matter. It matters to me, I shot back, rising from the couch. The distance between us felt like a chasm, and yet the heat of my fury filled the room. I want to know her name, Julian. I want to know everything. Or should I just go upstairs and ask her myself? His face paled, and I saw the mask of confidence begin to slip. Her name's Lila, he admitted quietly. She's a client. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that startled even me. A client? Are you serious right now? Are we running some kind of brothel out of this house? Because I can't seem to keep track of all the women you're entertaining here. Julian flinched but didn't respond. For the first time, I saw him struggle to maintain control. The man who always had a clever retort or a disarming smile looked utterly lost. Tell me the truth, I demanded, stepping closer. How long has this been going on? Was this happening while you were begging me to forgive you? While you were swearing you changed? It's not like that, Julian said quickly, his voice rising in panic. It's only been a few weeks. I swear, Helen, it's nothing serious. It's not even real. She's not you. I wanted to scream, to hurl something at him, to physically shake him until his lies cracked open and the truth spilled out. But I knew Julian well enough to recognize the rhythm of his manipulation. His words were designed to pacify me, to make me believe this was a fleeting mistake rather than a calculated betrayal. Get out, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. What? He blinked, caught off guard. You heard me. My eyes burned as I held his gaze. Get out. Helen, please, let me explain. There's nothing left to explain. I shouted, the dam of my emotions finally breaking. You don't get to stand there and act like this is salvageable. You lied to me, Julian. You looked me in the eyes and promised me it was over. And then you brought her into our home. Into our bed. He stepped closer, his hands raised in supplication. I made a mistake, he pleaded. But I love you. I love us. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. You want to fix this? I took a shaky breath, the enormity of his betrayal crashing over me like a wave. Then leave. Walk out that door, and don't come back. Julian stared at me, his expression shifting from desperation to disbelief. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to losing control. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. But just as I thought he might turn and leave, I saw something else flash across his face, something darker. His lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smirk, and a shiver ran down my spine. You're making a mistake, he said quietly, his voice devoid of the warmth it carried moments ago. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded, my pulse quickening. Julian didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and began typing something rapidly. Then he looked up, his smirk growing. You think you know everything, Helen, he said, his tone low and menacing. But there are things you don't understand. Things you can't even begin to imagine. What are you talking about? My voice wavered despite my attempt to stay composed. You think this is just about Lila? Julian asked, stepping closer. You think this is the worst thing I've done? The room felt colder somehow, his words hanging in the air like frost, chilling me to the core. What the hell are you talking about? I spat, my voice sharper than I intended. My heart was racing, a mix of fury and dread pounding through me. Julian didn't answer right away. He took his time, like he was savoring the moment, letting his smirk stretch wider. "You've been so busy playing the victim, Helen, that you never stopped to ask the right questions." "The right questions?" I shot back, incredulous. "You think this is some kind of game?" "No," he said softly, his gaze steady, unervingly calm. "But I do think you've been naive. You were so focused on forgiving me, on saving this illusion of a marriage, that you never thought to look at the bigger picture." I took a step back, my head spinning. "Stop talking in circles, Julian. Say what you mean." He tilted his head, studying me like I was some sort of puzzle. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Let me make it simple for you. This thing with Lila? That's surface level. The tip of the iceberg. The truth, Helen, is that I haven't been honest with you for years." The blood drained from my face, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," he said, stepping closer, "that there are pieces of my life you don't know about. Pieces I've worked very hard to keep hidden. And before you go playing the righteous martyr, you might want to think twice about digging any deeper." I stared at him, my breath shallow, my mind racing to connect the dots. This wasn't Julian anymore. At least, not the version of him I thought I knew. This man in front of me, calm and calculated, was a stranger, a man with secrets deeper than I had ever imagined. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice trembling but defiant. Julian chuckled softly, shaking his head. "A threat? No, Helen. Think of it as a warning. You've already seen what happens when you push too hard." My stomach churned, the weight of his words settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I thought back to the night he had confessed the first affair, the way he had seemed almost too eager to come clean, as if it had been rehearsed. Had that been a distraction? A way to keep me from looking closer? "What have you done, Julian?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, his smirk fading into something colder, more menacing. "Do you really want to know?" he asked, his tone almost daring me. "Because once you open that door, there's no going back." My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the depth of his betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was something more. Something darker. And whatever it was, Julian had no intention of letting me walk away unscathed. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "You're right," I said, meeting his gaze with all the strength I could muster. "I do want to know. Every last thing." His smirk returned, but this time it carried a dangerous edge. "Then buckle up, Helen," he said softly. "You're in for one hell of a ride." Julian didn't speak immediately. He let the silence stretch, his gaze unrelenting, as though he was testing me, daring me to flinch. When he finally spoke, his words hit like a hammer. "It started before we even got married," he said, his tone maddeningly calm. "You thought you knew me, Helen, but the truth is, I've always kept certain arrangements. Women, connections, money. It's all intertwined." I felt my knees go weak, but I didn't let myself collapse. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Arrangements?" I spat. "You mean affairs?" He smirked, shaking his head. "Affairs are small time. This is bigger, bigger than you, bigger than us." My stomach churned, but I refused to let him see my fear. "What exactly have you gotten yourself into, Julian?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The kind of things that keep people like us living comfortably. You really think the boutique I bought for you came out of nowhere? That our vacations were all on savings? I made deals, Helen. Deals that required favors." "Favors?" My voice cracked, the word twisting like a knife. "What does that mean?" "It means I work with people who don't ask questions, as long as I deliver results," he said, his voice devoid of remorse. Businessmen. Politicians. People who need things taken care of quietly. And sometimes that involves keeping certain women happy. My vision blurred with anger. You're telling me you've been a glorified fixer? A con man? Julian laughed, cold and sharp. Call it what you want, Helen. But I've built something here, something real. And you've benefited from it, whether you like it or not. My mind raced, memories clicking into place. The late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain, the expensive gifts he couldn't afford on paper, the sudden, unexplained trips out of town. I thought it was infidelity. I never imagined it was this. You're a criminal, I whispered. You've put me in danger, Julian. Relax, he said, waving a dismissive hand. I've handled everything. As long as you don't make waves, no one will touch you. But his words only stoked my fury. He didn't understand. He had gambled with our lives, my life, and now he was asking me to sit quietly and accept it. You disgust me, I said, my voice trembling. And I'm not staying in this nightmare with you. Julian's face darkened, his calm facade cracking. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice low and threatening. You think you can just walk out? You'll ruin everything. I straightened, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Watch me. I didn't sleep that night. While Julian prowled the house like a caged animal, I locked myself in the guest room, piecing together a plan. If he thought I'd roll over and let him control me, he was dead wrong. By morning, I had everything I needed. The first step was subtle. I started with his phone, which he carelessly left charging in the kitchen. I knew his password, it was our wedding date, a cruel irony, and within minutes, I was scrolling through the messages he thought were private. What I found made my blood run cold. Transactions. Names. Locations. Evidence of his dealings with people I knew I could use against him. I forwarded everything to myself and deleted the traces. The second step was a calculated risk. I contacted a lawyer, a friend of my sister who specialized in high-profile divorces. I explained my situation in vague terms, careful not to reveal too much over the phone. She agreed to meet me the next day. The third step was the hardest. I had to act like everything was fine. Julian's paranoia grew with each passing day. He watched me closely, his questions pointed. Where were you this afternoon? Why are you on your phone so much? But I deflected, playing the role of the weary, resigned wife. In truth, I was building my case. I compiled every piece of evidence I could find, screenshots, bank statements, recordings of our conversations where he let his secrets slip. By the end of the week, I had enough to bury him. The day I left him was quiet, deliberate. I waited until he was out of the house, off to one of his mysterious meetings. I packed a bag, left a letter on the counter, and walked out the door without looking back. But I wasn't done. The lawyer I had hired was relentless. She helped me secure a restraining order, freezing our shared accounts and ensuring I had protection if Julian tried to retaliate. The evidence I had gathered was turned over to authorities, carefully, through anonymous channels, to ensure his connections couldn't shield him. Julian's empire crumbled within weeks. His associates turned on him to save themselves, and the scandal made headlines. He was arrested on charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy, his charm no match for the mountain of evidence against him. It's been a year since I left Julian. I moved to a new city, started over, and built a life free of his shadow. The scars he left will take time to heal, but I've learned to trust myself again, to see the red flags I once ignored. Sometimes, I still hear his voice in my nightmares, but I wake up knowing he can't hurt me anymore. I chose freedom, and I fought for it. And I won.